to go.
Okay.
Okay.
Welcome to the new media show. We're back.
Doing the new media show again.
People are actually going to listen to this junk.
We do it live.
We're live right now.
We'll just do it live.
We're going live. We're going live.
We just can't get enough. The new media show.
Let's go.
Just do it live.
We're going live. We're going live.
Bada bing, bada boom.
The new media show. We do it live.
Just do it live.
We're going live. We're going live. We're going live. We're going live.
The new media show. I'm like Adam Curry, and you're more like John C. Dvorak.
I think I am Adam Curry, and you're the old curmudgeon.
We do it live. Doing the new media show again.
The new media show.
Technology.
Woo. We make it sound so special.
Well, Rob, here we are again with a new media show. How are you?
I'm doing terrific, Todd. It's great to be back doing the show again for, how many episodes is it now? I think we're up to
540 something.
547. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I think this might be 545. So I have to look, but it's a number.
It's a number, and we have taken quite a few days off of the show over the years. That's why the number probably isn't even a lot higher than that.
Right. That's very, very true.
Well, Todd, there's been a lot of stuff happening in the medium over the last week or so. It's kind of surprising. So I kind of dug through and found some hot topics for us to talk about on the show today. So I'm excited for these topics because they're really going to uncover a whole bunch of new elements, and I'm sure that you're probably seeing the same thing.
I've had my head down, so I've just been reading what's been going on with in pod news and that
sure.
kind of stuff. But it's surprising there's as much going on as there is, being, that it's the middle of the summer here.
Yeah, so I guess it's indicative that this medium is still charging forward and doing well, but we continue to see layoffs too. So that's the thing, with like a Spotify. Right. So maybe that's more of a reflection of overinvestment as compared to the opportunity, because they were kind of looking to the future of seeing a lot of growth. But Spotify let go of 200 people. Just
specifically in their podcast area.
Right. Exactly. So that is, if there ever was a clear indication that there's a advertising revenue challenge, that would be the one right there. That's a big reduction in the production side, and some reorganization and some new leadership and all sorts of stuff going on over there. So
I'm seeing all the social posts by people that are like, I was part of the drawdown and part of the cut. And, so it's, I guess from that perspective, I'm, I don't know if am I surprised really? Because they don't have that deep of a pool. And I don't know if it was a combination of Gimlet and the cuts didn't come from Megaphone. Came from where? It came from Gimlet and Paracast.
Yeah, exactly. It was more on the content production side. A lot of consolidation going on there on that side. Yeah.
So that just tells you that maybe the advertising piece is doing okay, but the content production side is, waffling.
Well, that, and maybe they're not growing the audience that they need to pay for the staff that they have, or just the advertisers aren't there as much as they were prior. So it's got to be one of the two. And I have heard many people in the industry say that there has been a significant drawdown in advertising buys and campaigns and things like that. So I don't know if you're seeing it, Todd, on your platform or not. I mean, as we've seen in the past, these indications can vary wildly between different players in the industry.
Well, from the programmatic side, I see no change. We continue to add podcasters to that are enabling programmatic, and they're getting paid. So from that perspective, the numbers continue to go up. And, maybe it's a it's an indication of just adding more people, the numbers going up, but I don't really see a decline in inventory.
Well, that's
So,
good. That's good to see.
again, we're working with SoundStack, so I don't control that piece. They're the ones that do the fill. So
Mhm.
from my perspective, we just set it and forget it, and we get a report at the end of the month, and we write the checks, and uh, horse swap money, and and it works out.
Well, as long as the revenue is still coming into your advertisers through this program, the programmatic stuff, that's fantastic news. That also is an indication that maybe the advertisers are looking for more value in their buys. So maybe what we've seen is a reduction in the host read buys, which tend to be a little higher CPM, right?
Well, I did hear, I was getting caught up on some podcasts, and I did hear one of the team, I don't know if it was the founder or who it was from Red Circle, said that they felt programmatic was being a little softer
Well, I'm
currently.
sure it is.
But from my perspective, it doesn't look like it's softening. But again, we're dealing with probably much, much lower numbers than what, if you have a staff, we're a team of under 20.
Mhm.
And when when you hear that they're cutting 200, that's you have to have a serious amount of revenue coming in to meet the expectations
Of a payroll like
of
that,
a
right?
payroll of 200. That
Yeah.
that's a big number, and you probably think that if you think about what they pay, there's probably minimum salary over there was probably $100,000 at least.
Mhm.
And maybe not for some staff members, but let's just take an average of 100K a year, and you multiply that out by 200. That's a number. That's a big number.
Yeah.
And if you're on the content creation staff and you have to create hit after hit, you have to drive audience and drive numbers. If they're not doing that, if not creating original content, you look at all the content they didn't create that they said they were going to, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and then the budgets that they're placing against some of these shows, that's for an independent podcaster, it's if someone called me and said, "Hey, Todd, we're going to produce your show for you, and it's going to cost you $5,000 an episode."
Mhm.
I'd hang up on them. But that's what that's what the overhead costs on some of those show productions were. Huge, huge money. So, not only do you have huge overhead for salaries, and you have huge production costs, and then then you take that baseline. Let's say it's $5,000 an episode, and maybe that's talent cost everything. That means that show has to produce, and with the staff that was behind it, let's say there's 6 or 7 people, you
Mhm.
take their salaries, you take the production costs per episode, all of a sudden, now that show's gotta produce $25,000-$30,000 in revenue per episode to even make sense.
Yeah.
And and guess what? If you're building brand new content and trying to, garner new audiences, that's easier said than done. I would never, ever want to have to be in the business of having to create hits like television shows. Who wants to be in that business where you are going to do a pilot, do 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, and then say, "Okay, nope, that didn't work." Most podcasts take hundreds of episodes to garner huge audiences. So if they're trying to create a one hit, they're trying to create a serial every time, they're not going to do it.
Yeah.
So, and again, I don't know what everyone's roles over there were. They got cut, but sounds to me like um, they just weren't creating hits.
Well, that's the challenge, and it's also an interesting opportunity for the podcast space. You think about all those creators, all those producers, all those hosts, or whatever that are getting let go. Right? What are they likely to do after they leave? They're going to obviously look for a new position somewhere, or they're going to start their own production company, right? And start producing their own shows or be a consultant to other shows. So this could be, it's kind of like a reshuffling of the chairs on the deck, right? People are, so we could come out of this with kind of like a renewed energy around independent producers too, that are creating new shows that are independent from the big networks. So they've, what Spotify and what these bigger companies have done is absorb a lot of the talent from the medium of podcasting into their kind of pool of creators, and have been creating shows for their particular platform. But if they're let go, they're free to do, their own thing. So we may see a influx of this. And I think we're going to see this on the technology side with a lot of tech companies, because a lot of tech workers have been let go. And I think what a lot of those folks are going to do is go off and create their own startup, or they're going to create their own AI company. And so what this oftentimes creates is kind of like this explosion of smaller companies that are starting up, trying to establish themselves. Some will fail, some will make it, but it could create a completely new industry of podcasting as we look, 2 or 3 years from now. It could be a significant change, and that this is kind of a good lead in to what I wanted to talk about next was, is mainstream media kind of dying off? As you look at major networks, major media sources right now are increasingly losing the trust with their audiences. Can they be believed for what they're telling us? Are they, are they part of, telling, less than truths out there about what's happening in the world? And that's driving people to independent media increasingly. And thus kind of plays off this thing I was talking about before about independent producers having a leg up. I mean, I think we're starting to see, I don't know if you saw it, Tucker Carlson just launched his new Twitter show. I don't know if you've seen that or not, but it's had 60 million views of his new Twitter show. That's like exponentially bigger than his Fox News show. So,
well,
yeah.
it's a number, but I do want to come back to one thing you said.
Yeah.
And I've actually got to thinking this week a little bit based upon some discussions from my team in our rant channel. You asked me last week if we think podcast consultants should have an exam.
Oh, right. Right.
And based on a couple of calls this week, I think so. Not that they're going to ever take one. But,
and should a podcast consultant actually have their own show, right?
Right.
That was the other piece of what we talked about.
And it was because it was very obvious. I won't go into the details, but it was a very common podcast 101 thing that my support team said to matter of fact, not one, but two podcast consultants for one show that were on a tech support call.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike said a certain phrase, a certain term, and both of the consultants were like deer in the headlights.
Yeah.
And he says, "What do you mean you don't understand that? What do you mean that you don't understand what I'm talking about?" And it was Mike's kind of like doing the head slap, right? So he had to kind of go through and explain this podcast 101 thing to these two individuals. And the host was also on the call, and Mike's being politically correct and nice, and and it's just one thing's for sure: if you are a good podcast consultant, if you are educated about the podcasting space, nuts to bolts, you just it's more than being an editor,
Right.
and this was a very simple thing that is, if a client would have come to me and said, and of course that's unfair because I've probably seen every scenario of stupidity out there, and Mike has too, and I was it was one of those situations where in like 3 seconds, I said, "Oh, here's the problem," you know? And yet 2 consultants had to get my support team on the call. We had to spend 15, 20 minutes with them explaining what the issue was. And literally it was a very, very simple fix, but the so-called consultant had nary a clue where to even start. So
Yeah.
I think what will happen then is if these individuals that were laid off, if they don't get rehired into other groups, I think you're right. They'll probably start businesses, and maybe we'll see some of those folks at Podcast Movement. You know, I know that the amount of email coming into my inbox asking me, "Are we hiring?" has went up exponentially from people that I have never heard of before, had no idea. I'm an ex-employee over here, or I'm an ex-employee there. I used to work here, and I had nary a clue who they are,
Mhm.
and we're not hiring. I don't need to hire anybody right now. So, um, yeah. So it is kind of an interesting time.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw the article that was talking about Marty Michael from Gumball. I don't know if you've ever heard of
I've heard
Marty
of
Michael.
Gumball, but I don't know if I've heard of him.
Yeah, I worked with Marty when he was just getting started with that network when I was working at Spreaker. But he was talking about how Gumball has integrated what all of their podcasting stuff that they're doing. So they started out as kind of like a younger comedy kind of, it was called Headgum, um, building out all these shows. Like they had like 25 shows or whatever. They were primarily just audio, right? And they were doing live events, live shows. This was all prior to the pandemic.
Mhm.
And what they've increasingly done is shift over to doing more YouTube stuff. So they're combining, they're increasingly, and this is a network that's looks like is starting to work on trying to solve this dilemma of an audio podcast being successful as a video show on YouTube. So and then selling that to advertisers. And I know that when I was at Lipson, the AdvertiseCast folks were merging those YouTube numbers in with their pitches to advertisers increasingly. So I would imagine they're doing it more, but that's the game that he's playing. So they're actively trying to find YouTubers that are successful in YouTubers and getting them to create audio programs as well. So you've got this convergence that's happening, and that's kind of a little bit what I'm playing with my new Trust Factor show that I'm doing. We're making a video show, but having it also available as an audio podcast too. So trying to work on that. Now, granted, there's many in the industry that don't necessarily like the fact that we're seeing YouTube aggressively name and get involved in podcasting, because I think that there's some in the industry that have stated that that could be disastrous for the podcast industry to have YouTube really kind of take over dominance of the listenership side of podcasting and monetization.
Well, if they have success in moving those shows to that
Mhm.
medium, then that's a good business model. That's something that I don't think a lot of other people are doing.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of at the cutting edge of where this medium is. That people are enthusiastic about YouTube and enthusiastic about this convergence. And then I'm also hearing increasing conversation around the convergence between radio and podcasting more. And I've heard some from the radio industry that are starting to spout that creating shows that are digital first, and then formatting them in a way that they could be also distributed as radio shows as well as podcasts. And I think that the NPR folks have kind of pioneered that approach to some degree, but so I think this era is about convergence somewhat, and I think
Mhm.
also about trying to find ways of repurposing content into various platforms as well, whether it be shorts or full length episodes, and being able to somehow figure out ways to monetize them on all these platforms.
Well, I'm glad I don't have that issue
It's
of having to
and then there's
do
AI,
all
Todd.
that. Well, we've been down that road a
We've
little too deep here recently. We don't
we've
need to go
we beat
we've
that horse,
a
haven't we?
dead horse quite a bit.
Right, right. So this past week, I've also had Apple announcing iOS 17, which isn't going to officially come out till the fall. But I guess there's some significant upgrades to the Apple Podcast feature set. Todd, I don't know if you read through that announcement, but and also Apple Music Radio is actually going to be integrated into the podcast app.
Which I
So
don't know if that's a great idea. That's just going to dilute.
I think it's a
Uh,
competitive effort to Spotify, is what it is. I think.
yeah, but I think it's still going to dilute the space. I don't know. I just I have mixed emotions on that
Yeah, yeah.
because it's podcasters are having a hard enough time already being found in the podcasting app, and now they're going to add music to it. Come on, bad move. It's a bad move.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's a good move. They have a music app. So,
Yes. So we got a comment from Ivo, who said also in the Netherlands there is a radio station, a commercial radio station that converted a podcast to a radio show. I mean, the concept of repurposing a podcast on the radio isn't kind of something new, but it's typically gone the other way, right? You create a radio show and then you repurpose it out as a podcast. But increasingly, I'm hearing that this is happening more and more where it's going the other way, which may be a better approach. I don't know what you think, Todd.
radio stations have been attempting and to do this a little bit, but there's not been that many that have done it successfully.
Yeah.
Because they take the radio program and try to make it into a podcast. It never seems to completely get the vibe. It still feels like it's radio versus being a podcast oftentimes and not.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a delicate line to watch and to actually do. And we'll see. I mean, I'm going to follow it pretty closely. But to get back to the Apple podcast thing, they're going to upgrade, I guess, the search capability of the platform, which is always a good thing, right? So they're going to be looking for other fields and other areas in the metadata to produce better results. Plus, they're going to finally, Todd, they're going to support their own ecosystem
Finally,
in their namespace and actually display episode art. So that's been a component of their namespace for I don't know how many years now, Todd.
years and years and years and years and years.
Right, and they are just now embracing the episode art. So that's good.
and
And
that's
channel
gonna
art too.
that's gonna open up a whole business realm. Because I've been fortunate enough on my tech show to have people submit a variety of album art. I have over 100 pieces of album art that I can rotate in. As a matter of fact, every episode I put a different album art in for the episode. Now, this show, we don't have that depth of album art. So maybe if you're a listener of the show and you have some artistic capabilities, we will we can start adding we can start doing episode art on this show. Matter of fact, if you do episode art for us and we use it in the show, we'll put you in the value split for the value for value. We'll give you a value split of the episode's earnings from value for value.
Yeah, that'd be great. But I guess all these upgrades are coming to all of the OSs for Apple. They have the iPad OS, the Mac OS, Watch OS, and the TV OS. So Apple has a lot of OSs, don't they?
Yes. and soon some $34.99 Wear OS or whatever they're calling it. So
Right. Well, that's the other big announcement is their AR glasses that they announced this past week too. And I'm curious on how that's going to be around the consumption of video podcasts. So,
well, the
you need
challenge
a
is
$3,500
Who
It,
has
it,
Rob? Who has $3,500
well, it's
laying around to do AR glasses? There've been all kinds of.
Todd.
It's a lot of money.
I've heard some people say that i- if you don't own like a 72-inch television or something like that, flat screen television that can cost $2,000 or $3,000, this could be a way that you could upgrade your TV viewing experience to 100 plus virtual screen. So
But who wants to sit with
maybe
something on their
that's the
head?
upside, right?
It's just to me, it's cool and it has some utility, but to me, it's like it's just another part of the Apple ecosystem where you're paying homage to the Mac, and you're shelling out thousands of dollars a year for upgrades. And
Right.
in this day and age, I don't know if people are going to be. I think there'll be a subset of people that'll rush to get one because they got to have everything
Oh
Mac
yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
but not me.
Well, and I did see in their demo in their presentation that they demoed being able to take like FaceTime calls and
Right.
like Zoom calls. I just wonder what the image looks like going back to them. Because you don't have like a webcam in front of you, right?
Mhm.
So how does that work? Or is it going to be like a virtual version of yourself or something like that that's going to
You're
go
sitting there
back?
looking like a dork with a headset on top of your head.
Right, it's gonna be auto-generated from the AI, right? That's gonna be integrated into
And
this,
part of the challenge has always been with these is people that wear glasses are always at a disadvantage in wearing these types of devices. If you have good vision, they seem to work really well. It was just like with the Apple Glass or whatever they called it for a while. If you didn't wear glasses, it was a great product to have fun with. But if you wore glasses, you were stumbling around blind because getting a prescription version of those was just insanely expensive.
Yeah, well, I guess this device has that ability too. You can get prescription lenses for being able to look into the device.
But I
And I guess
oh.
you can see the person's eyes on the other side. So when a person enters the room, you can see that person through its cameras. But you can also see that person that's walking in the room can see your eyes through the lens.
Hmm.
So
Well,
that was
iOS
interesting.
17, I think
Yep.
my biggest excitement is the episode album art support.
Right.
I think that's going to be big. So there's all kinds of fun things you can do with that.
Yeah, and that update's not going to be available on your iOS device until the fall. So it's usually like in late August or
Right.
early September.
I did see
usually
some
when they-
people that already loaded the beta up. I think I saw some posts on people that played with the
Yeah.
beta, but
I wouldn't load beta on anything
no,
on my primary device.
no, it's a little early for that. So
Yeah.
my days of wanting to do that is gone. Hey, you want to thank Papa HD for the 1, 2, 3, 4 boost. He's listening on Fountain. So thanks for tuning
Yeah.
in today and listening live and boosting. We are lit and live in the podcast 2.0 space by using one of those newfangled dangled podcast apps at podcastapps.com. And what's the beauty of this right now is a lot more apps are starting to add the live function. So I think we're up to 5 or 6 apps now that support lit and live. So it continues to grow. I think Pocket Cast is in that group now as well.
Yeah, that's
So
fantastic, Todd.
yeah, so if so you're going to be able to experience us in the app live, and if you want, you can boost the show. So thanks, Papa HD, for the boost here about 20 minutes ago.
So Todd, I also noticed that downloads from Apple Podcasts are at an all-time high, I guess, according to Buzzsprout's stats for May. So I don't know if you're seeing the same thing.
I haven't looked, and I know we made some changes based upon some of the stuff that was going on with Apple Core Media. So I haven't been in and looked at May's numbers, but you can more define what is actually Apple Podcast now.
Right. it's separating the Apple Core Media stuff from those numbers, which
So
may
what
have
did Buzzsprout
given.
actually give numbers?
I didn't actually see that specifically. Let's see here, if I can see that. Let's see here if they gave some numbers on that. On No, I didn't. I don't
Yeah,
have a
they
shortcut to
didn't.
that.
Yeah, they didn't actually do it. But one thing has not changed is the number of shows being published in the last 30 days. That number is still down. We're still around 360,000 for the last 30 days. And what's more
Mhm.
interesting is the number of shows that are producing episodes in the last 90 days is down significantly as well. So
Mm,
that's down to 508,000 shows have published a new episode in the last 90 days, 447,000 last 63, 67 in the last 30, 254 in the last 10, 123,000 in the last 3 days. So
So are
you
you
can,
surprised by that, Todd?
no, I'm not surprised at all.
Okay.
Not in the least.
Why is that?
Um, I
Why
mean,
aren't you
I'm
surprised by it?
just using the bellwether of what we're doing in sales.
Oh,
I'm just looking at our numbers and we fortunately my I guess for a better word, my what's the word I want to use? Revenue line is still creeping up,
mhm,
and we're still putting more people in than we're losing.
mhm,
So, that's a key metric for me. And I'm
right,
watching it month to month to month to month to see what's happening and see if that gap is getting bigger. Because
mhm,
obviously you want the line to go, north a little faster than it goes south.
yeah.
And so overall, I'm pretty pleased. And also, people are taking advantage of our add on services too. So that helps as well. Matter of fact, we've seen a big growth in some of our add-on services and people using, um, adding additional services to their current plan. So that helps the bottom line too.
So what do you think is going on out there, Todd? Is it just that there's fewer new shows, or the shows that have been active over maybe the last year, whatever, have pod faded? Is that
Well, we had this, this, what do you want to call it? This drunken stupor during COVID,
COVID? Right. That's true. That's true.
and
Where it was growing
and
almost 100,000 shows a month.
where it was just out of control.
Right.
And all those shows, and again, I don't have a list of the shows that were starting in
Mhm.
February, March of 19 and went through, but I would guess a lot of those secondary shows people started, and I think we're back on the normal growth track. Now
Mhm.
it's a little slower now because of the economy and things being tighter. But also at the same time, from my perspective, there's 30 podcast hosts out there that are competing for business. And the simple fact is that you just spread more users. We are migrating a huge number of folks to Blueberry that are coming for specific features now. And, that was part of my game plan for really the last 2 years was continue to add features, and get to the point where we are feature rich enough that we become, a viable migration place, where
Mhm.
because, most probably 95% of podcasters will never migrate in their lifetime. They start at Libsyn, they stay at Libsyn. They start
Right.
at Buzzsprout, they'll never leave Buzzsprout.
So are you
And
seeing that there's continued substantial growth in the WordPress side of your business with the plugin?
that's always been a mainstay.
Okay.
So
No, I
it's
mean,
kind
is the balance of that still as strong as it
it's
has
probably
been?
70-30.
Okay.
70% of our customers are on WordPress, 30% are on the platform. But it's the features, and I'm
Mhm.
not going to talk about the specific features they're coming for because, I'll let the competitors figure that out on their own.
Right. Right. Sure.
So, but it's about features. It's about,
Well,
making the
it's
experience
the
better.
differentiations, right? That's
Mhm.
That's the key with all these companies. And I'm not in the hosting business like I was before, but that, trying to say, well, this platform is better than this one, it really gets back to the content creator and what they're trying to accomplish, what their
Right,
goals
right.
are. I know I get asked continuously, well, I'm doing this show, this type of show, where's the best place for me to go?
The
You know,
answer always is their own.com.
well, yeah, I mean, that's certainly true from an SEO standpoint and
Right,
things like
right.
that, but as far as the feature set, pricing, all that stuff of various platforms, it can vary a lot, and the actual functionality and the additional features. I know there's been some announcements of AI kind of integration with some of the podcast hosts over the last few weeks, and so you can clearly see where that is moving the ball forward with differentiation as well.
But
So
again, it's a feature, and
right.
it depends on how well it's been. Like what Buzzsprout did, they integrated with Podimo or whatever the name of the
Yep. Yep.
platform is,
Yep.
and so they're reliant on them, 100% reliant for them to keep that product viable, and not be something that is, here's my challenge. Again, I keep saying this. Something, if you're going to add a product to your service, it has to be something that's going to be useful for a very long time. And if you do not, with the pace of everything, the way it's moving, you could spend a lot of time and effort, and all of a sudden you could end up with a product that is timed out.
Right. The service that Buzzsprout integrated with was it's called Podium. I think is the
Podium,
actual
yeah.
name. It's Podium, and it's this is kind of marketing terminology, but they're a trailblazer in artificial intelligence AI tools for podcasters. So, yeah.
And I haven't tested their platform, so I really can't speak to it.
Well, Albin posted, and you would expect this from Albin, but he said he tested all of the other AI tool options, and these folks stood out. But I also think that I think these folks are one of the few of these AI platforms that had active and reliable API connections too. So that's always a
Right.
necessary component if you want to do a partnership like that. So
That's right.
I'm not sure that, other platforms that are doing similar competitive services to what these folks are doing had active APIs.
Right. And that's always an issue, is we've always been API feature rich. So
Mhm.
when people want to integrate with our stats, they can pull our stats via API, and all those types of things.
If you're a young company, you oftentimes haven't had the time or the resources to develop
it's
a
usually
robust set of APIs.
it's usually the older companies that don't have it,
Well,
because
that too. It goes the other way too. I agree
right,
with you.
right.
Well, it
But the
depends on the
younger,
business model too,
yeah,
right?
the younger companies should have, I guess, for better words, they should know.
Yeah, they should have thought about that, right, as a
Right.
marketing vehicle
Yeah.
for them.
But
From a
so if
strategic
Podium did
partnership standpoint.
so I'm sure Podium is going to be looking to do more deals with more companies.
Yeah.
And again, it is just a matter of then, feature chase, So I've never been one to actually try to chase features. I
Right.
think that's dumb to
Right.
do that. So we always try to look at things that were a unique value that would
Right.
help that's going to help our customers on our platform.
Well, I think I think that the integration with this new service, it's called co-host AI, I guess is what Buzzsprout's calling it. But you upload your media file, and it automatically does all that stuff as part of your episode publish workflow.
Right.
So there is an advantage there, I think, to some degree, to have that kind of workflow. It's the same thing. It probably works with their magic mastering that they have too. So the audio file gets processed, and then
By the way, their magic mastering is Alphonic. So just for
correct,
the record,
right? They did another API strategic partnership, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it's interesting to see this stuff, and I don't know. Was there another platform that did a API integration like that?
I don't know. I'm sure everyone's working on something.
Asha, I think, is doing something too. So that's the company out of France. But
There was something I was going to say to you, and I can't remember. Oh, I know what I was going to tell you. So, by the way, your experiment failed last week, right?
which experiment was that?
Recording the show on your phone and then
Oh, right. I think it was just too much data. It couldn't handle
too
it.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to do that in segments, I think.
Yeah, or just shorter shows. I guess I haven't tried it with, like a 30-minute show or something like that, which I will. So to see if it works for shorter content.
But what they said was it was supposed to work for 90 minutes or 120 minutes or something, and it didn't.
110, I think, is what the number
110,
was. Right.
yeah, and it just absolutely
And it
choked on it.
choked on it. I guess our
'Cause-
content was so in depth and controversial, it couldn't take it.
Well, yeah, controversial. I think it just choked on it. Is what it did. As soon as you told me you got the error message, I was like, "Oh, that's great. That's that.
Yeah,
I'm sure that worked out well."
That's not a good sign.
So that's where the API integrations come in. Is where you can actually, you're not doing it on a phone. And you're
Yeah.
not trying to,
It's a more reliable
the
way of
jury
doing it.
rig a solution.
Right. So I also saw some numbers too. It said that 50%, I have a hard time believing this, but it said 50% of YouTube creators earn more than $500 a month. Claims a new
50%
survey.
of 50% of
Of
those that
YouTube. Well, all it says is YouTube creators earn
of those
more
that are
than
of
$500
those
a
that are
month.
monetized.
Right. I'm sure that's true.
Yeah,
Claims
right.
a new survey, but I guess a person posts um, I guess people are continuing to be revoked in their monetization.
Right. All the
right.
time.
Right.
Say one thing wrong, and the YouTube gods will taketh away.
They figure that it's been evaluated and it's not a channel that they're going to be able to sell advertising to. So why have it as an advertising enabled platform,
Well,
right?
I think
we talked about this moderation issue, right? That could be what happens to podcasts in the future too.
God
right?
forbid.
Right. So I think the technology is wanting to join us over here in the podcasting space to have deeper moderation. So I guess it's up to the industry to decide how much we want to embrace brand suitability and brand safety. Is it going to be pervasive in the industry, or is this what we want? I think
Well, that'll be part of the closed podcasting ecosystem that's pervasive and moderating. That'll be part of the closed podcasting.
Yeah, I
Those-
mean, yeah, those
won't-
listening platforms that want to embrace that, right?
It won't be part of the open podcasting ecosphere.
Yep. So we have a brewing conflict coming.
Well, I don't think there's any conflict. I think there is just
Well,
educated
there's
choices.
those that want that moderation being termed as brand safety for advertising. It's coming into the medium through the advertising pathway. The question gets back to is once it gets in, is it going to expand? Right.
Well, with more than
on certain platforms.
with at least 75% of shows in existence today that don't do any monetization, it doesn't matter to them at all.
Yeah. Right.
So I think it's at some point some of this becomes a little mute point.
But that's one of the downsides of going, this industry moving more towards a proprietary based approach.
But Rob, the
listening.
industry is not moving towards a proprietary based
I know.
space.
Well, that's good. That's a good.
Yeah, it is.
that's good.
It is certain companies moving toward a closed proprietary ecosystem.
Well, we do have those in this medium.
Yeah, we do. So
yeah.
those and those people there should be a list made of who's doing this type of activity, so content creators can know and understand that their content is, especially if they're being monetized, is subject to this scrutiny. They should know that.
Right.
And if they don't, I can't imagine anyone that's being monetized doesn't know that if their content is being scrutinized this way.
Well, yeah, I think that's a bigger question. I know that those companies are actively involved in the monetization um, conferences and things like that, like the IAB. They're actively involved in sponsoring and being involved in those opportunities to come into the medium through the advertising channel, and that's
But
yeah,
there are some long-standing companies in the podcasting space that are doing none of this.
right. Yeah,
It's a lot of the newcomers that are part of
it's
the
still early. It's still
it's
early
part
for this.
well, it's
Right.
part of this again, it's part of the closed ecosystem.
Hmm.
Those that are closed, that are not open, are doing these types of, in my opinion, nefarious activities, and people will probably cringe when I say that, but I get 5 calls a week for companies that wanna help us with content moderation. I keep telling them, "We don't have any content moderation. We don't do content moderation.
Right.
I have no
Well, you're
need
going to
for your
lose your
business."
safe harbor if you do it too, Todd.
Right.
That
And
that's
and
the
and
other thing.
it blows them away. "What do you mean you do content moderation?" "No, we don't do content moderation. We
Yeah, because
don't."
once you enable that in your platform, you've basically walked away from, was it Section 230
Right.
of of the um, of the legal code around
Yep.
being a platform for just discovery of content. You're not responsible for what the content is. So once you start getting in there and doing like what YouTube is doing, uh, YouTube is not considered a safe harbor for
No.
content. So they've lost
No,
that.
but well, they may claim they have it, but they still moderate heavily.
Well,
Spotify moderates heavily. I get the reports of their moderation.
but are they moderating based on topics or are they moderating based on copyright?
Episode content.
So they are heading down the moderation path.
Absolutely. I see it. I see reports all the time. If you say certain, it's usually a certain genre of content
Hmm.
that
It's
gets,
considered unsafe to advertisers.
well,
So,
no, it's considered unsafe for their platform. These aren't even shows that are monetized. These are shows that they are removing, that they are doing censoring on because of whatever reason, whatever deemed they violated their terms of service, deemed that's unacceptable content.
well, that's an
Uh,
interesting question, Todd. I mean, it would be interesting to go look at some of these companies that are doing this to look at their terms of service to see if they've modified those and just not let anybody know.
well, I don't think anybody's ever read 800 pages of the legalese over there. So, and I
It's
have
probably
no
in really,
desire.
really tiny characters too. So you
And
can't.
they always reserve the right to remove content. That's always a clause. That's a clause in my terms of service too.
Right.
You do such and such, you're no longer gonna be a customer of mine. So they all have that in there. They have the right to remove content. So it's just the content that what they deem from time to time. It blows me away. I see it come in, and then the podcasters, well, my episodes don't. So sometimes they only take down an episode, sometimes they take down a whole show. So I have
Right.
a podcaster come, how come my episode's not on Spotify? I'm like, well, we sent you the report of why it was removed.
Yeah.
And the minimalistic reason we are given. So
Yeah.
I have a dedicated spreadsheet that they have shared with me that has tabs in it of every month and the stuff that they've removed and that they don't want on the platform. So, and these shows are not being monetized.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting on that side.
But from that standpoint, they're the only ones that report anything. I don't get anything from anyone else. I don't
Hmm.
hear, of course, I don't hear the only reason I find out if something's been removed, if a customer comes and say, hey, I'm not over on such and such. And
Yeah.
most podcasters are not checking these platforms to make sure all their episodes are there. The show's
Hmm.
over there. They say, oh, my show's over there. I'm good. They don't go over there and look. And neither do I. I don't have time to go look at each platform to see if all my episodes have made it over there, have been syndicated over there.
Hmm.
So these platforms are already moderating content.
Right. Yeah.
And
So I don't know if you saw the the XX the Sirius XM media survey that was done about growing up with podcasts, the Gen Z podcast listener report. I don't know if you saw this or not.
no, I did not.
So they're 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 saying Gen Z is flocking to podcasts. So it says 47% of Americans 13 to 24 have listened to a podcast in the last month, and it says increase in 13 to 24 listenership in the last 5 years is 57%. So we've seen a big uptick in the amount of Gen Z folks. These are folks between the ages of 13 and 24 are listening to podcasts. And I guess back in 2018, only 28%.
So what are they listening to?
Let's see. Does it? It says, well, it runs through listeners at a glance. Women, 46%. 1 in 5 are Hispanic and Latino, and 15% are Black Americans, and 4% are Asian Americans. So it says engagement is off the charts.
Okay,
It says.
so okay, that's all buzzwords. So what
Yeah, it
are
is.
they engaging on? Do they say?
I haven't come across that yet. Say, okay, here it is. Gen Z's monthly podcast listener content snapshot. So the top genres for Gen Z is comedy. Number 2 is the entertainment and celebrity content. And number 3 is true crime. Number 4 is music. So I'm not really sure music and podcasting kind of don't go together that well, but I guess on some platforms they do, like Spotify. And then number 5 is games and hobbies. As far as genres, the top format is real life stories. So more reality based storytelling, I guess.
Kind of
And
makes
then
sense.
and then number 2 would be banter and conversation, which has always been a big part of podcasting. And the format is regular episodes. And number 4 is the interview. And then number 5 is bingeable shows. So this concept of uploading a bunch of episodes, and which has been going on at Netflix for a long time, is a big trend in the media industry. Is this cadence of publishing weekly, at least on the video side, has been drifting away as mainstream media is drifting away. So when Netflix puts up a new series, they put up all the episodes at once. So
Well, one thing that we can be assured is there is a very, very small subset of podcasters that are making bingeable, releasing 8, 9, 10 episodes at once. There's not a lot of podcasters doing that. I mean, it's a tiny, tiny amount.
yeah, I agree. It's not that that big of an activity.
Matter of fact,
Right.
on our platform, I know who they are because if my sport team does, because they say, hey, we've got 12 episodes we're going to upload. We're not going to have enough storage. Can you extend our storage? Because we don't do anything the other 5 months. So we know who those customers are. And it's a very, very, very tiny percentage of shows. I would imagine most of that bingeable content is coming out of companies that, just laid off 200 people, like Gimlet.
Right.
They're doing those types of, documentaries or whatever it may be. I've never considered making a bingeable listening. Oh, hopefully you don't crash this time, Rob.
Yeah.
Never made a bingeable podcast.
Yes, I wanted to share this this social media in podcast with the Gen Z, and it has some percentages of the Gen Z on their listenership and how they're discovering shows on social. And it looks like Gen Z is discovering on YouTube 84%, and on TikTok it looks like 80%, on Instagram 71%, and Facebook 55%, and Twitter 55%.
Hmm.
So this kind of feeds into the topic of the growing importance with the younger generation of YouTube. So, and it says here, turning to podcasts for big issues. So the big issue, it says 6 in 10 are tune into podcasts to keep up with latest social issues. Number 1 is social justice. Number 2 is the economy. And number 3 is gun laws. Number 4 is mental health. Number 5 is reproductive rights and climate change. Those are the big issues. And on the mental health side, it says here, over 8 in 10 listen to podcasts while doing nothing else. It says 80% listen to relax, and 2 in 3 listen to escape. That's interesting.
Escape
from
reality.
reality, I guess. Yeah.
Hmm.
And then on a trend with ad reception, I guess, which is kind of an interesting way of describing this. It says the Gen Z monthly podcast listener to open to ads and making purchases, ad types they find useful. 84% hosts discuss products and services. Well, that's not a huge surprise. And then 80% sponsorship messages, 76% recorded messages. It says after hearing an ad, 43% have purchased a product. And 44% have asked someone to purchase a product.
And that was for folks 13 to 17. So they have
Is that
some
the age
age
group?
range. Yeah, they said age group, which I find
Oh,
kind of funny because,
why did they change that age group?
well, because they didn't want to say that these teenagers were buying stuff on their own. They had to have a separate category there.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. But I think it's interesting that the Gen Z population values host-read ads,
I think everyone does.
right? Right. So that's the future, right? The pre-recorded stuff is still pretty high, 76%. So I guess it's safe to say that the path that we're on is okay. So anyway,
Well,
I thought I would.
if you're an advertising, if you have a show that's getting advertising,
Right.
Again, they don't talk about the shows and the engagement that don't have advertising.
Right. That's true. That's very, very true, Todd. So anyway, wanted to, let's see, what else do we want to talk about? The top 10 podcasts reach a third of all listeners. Did you see
Yeah.
this?
Okay, whatever.
I know. It's like, yeah, it's the old trend of the big get big, and I think we're
In the small
seeing
get
small
screwed.
get struggling, right? So, yeah. So it said, so the quote here is, want to reach a third of all podcast listeners, just advertise on the top 10 podcasts. It says the Edison podcast metrics. The data highlights how big the most listened to podcasts are for, if you want to get the top 50. I don't know what the breakdown of the top 50 is, but
Well,
what's the
I'd like to know what
percentage?
type of, if you look at Podtrack's numbers, you
Yeah.
can never really see who the biggest show is. It's a
Mm.
network. It's not a show. They never show
I
you
thought
who
they were tracking. I thought
they
they were
have.
tracking the
They
shows.
have some shows, but most of their
Mhm.
data is on networks. So they never really break it down.
Yeah.
And what is the biggest show in podcasting doing these days, numbers wise? That would mean that there would have to be shows that would be reaching 50 million people.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't be
I
surprised, Todd.
I would be shocked if there was people if there was hey, Joe Rogan. How many people they say he was reaching in his show
I
at one
haven't heard
time?
any recent numbers, and I haven't heard whether Spotify's put any updates on that. So that's a very good question. There's increasingly, some of the large shows are actually conservative shows, which is very interesting to me because I know in the early days of podcasting, politics wasn't really a big genre, you know,
And it
and
always leaned left.
yeah, it mostly always
Matter of
leaned
fact,
left, right?
there's a matter of fact, if you because I tried to do a little bit of a small, like it wasn't super scientific. It was just like maybe looking at 250 shows and being able to determine it was just kind of this random sample of were they left or were they right. And if I remember correctly, when I did that, it was always the shows leaned more left than right.
Right.
And so for whatever reason that might be.
Yeah, and I think if I think back to the earlier days of the medium, the conservative talk programs tended to be stronger on the radio than they were in
And they
podcasting.
did not. I don't think there was very many conservative shows, talk shows per se in
Mhm.
podcasting up until a few years ago. Now the Daily Wire changed all that.
Mhm.
Is that the right one?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
That's right network.
it's one of the big ones, right? I
Yeah.
mean, there's other shows like the Dan Bongino show and things like that that have kind of taken Rush Limbaugh's role
Hmm.
in the radio
But
space
but
too. He's on the radio too.
Rush never really had a podcast though. He was more. He had if he did, it was private. It was you had to
It was a
subscribe
paid
to it.
model. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it
paid
was a paid
model.
model. Right, right. But we are seeing, growth in, some of these big talkers moving to online, like Tucker Carlson or whatever. He's a very interesting example of that. And I think we're going to see others follow in his lead, given that he had in his first episode, he had over 60 million views of his video on Twitter. I mean,
So is
I
he
think
getting
he was
paid
getting
for
like
that?
3 million on Fox.
I have no idea
Yeah.
what he was getting there. I think it was more than that, but still, he had the number one program on Fox for a while, didn't he?
Yeah, that doesn't speak well for cable television, does it?
Well,
That
I
they're
think
only
he was.
getting
I think he was the biggest on. I think
he
he had the
was with
number
about
one
3.5
show on all networks. Yeah.
with about 3.5 million was the biggest show on cable news.
So that tells you something there.
Yeah, go for 3 million to 60 million just by changing your publishing platform is remarkable.
It's for me. I can barely watch any mainstream media anymore. I mean, I start getting apprehensive. Still to this day, I just don't. It's the
Yeah.
same old doom and gloom, same old stuff, same old politics, same old junk.
Yeah, and can you trust it? That's the other thing. Is it all just propaganda? Government propaganda or corporate propaganda? I mean, we just, it's hard to know, right?
You must
That's
be
the
in
thing.
Rob. I think you started listening to the No Agenda show.
I listen to it on occasion, but I've got my own thoughts on this based on what I see in the world. So
I know, but there's some zingers out there. There's some stuff out there that's reported on that if you really don't analyze what is being said, you're kind of like, where did that come from?
well,
Yeah.
that's certainly true.
Or you hear these montages of every station, every mainstream media person saying the same phrase.
It's always
The-
funny,
the exact-
seeing those, right? Where
the
they're
exact
using
same
the
phrase.
exact same words. Right.
Again, and so either the Republicans or the Democrats sent the talking points over, and here's what you're to say.
Talk about if you don't say the right thing, you're obviously not part of the memo distribution
That's right.
platform, right?
And it's spread far
I
and
missed
wide.
the memo.
It's kind of funny though. It's because I've always told my writing team at GNC, I've always told them, do not ever. You can use a quote from a press release, but do not do verbatim. Please read the press release, do your own research, and then write the article.
Right.
Don't ever regurgitate the talking points in a press release unless it's and if you do, make sure you quote it so that you know it's a
Right.
quote from the press release, and
You can
yeah, it's
separate
kinda
yourself from it.
right, right.
Because if it's wrong, you could get called out for it in the future. Right.
So it's like one of those things where you're always always trying to look at things from, okay, well, how are they? Because companies, we're all guilty of this. Companies want to set a certain message, they
Right.
want to set a certain tone, and they want that to be conveyed exactly like it's being put
Yeah.
out. And I often get really irritated, and I don't have well, maybe I do have my button here. Let's see if I have it. I get really irritated
Don't eat me, James Cridland.
when sometimes I'll send something over to James and then he'll take like 3 words from what I sent him over. And I'm like, James, you missed the key point. You missed the key point of what
He took what he wanted out of
he
it,
took what he
Todd.
wanted. He took just
Right.
a, I'm like, fuck, I just like, come on.
Yeah, I think we need to get James back on again.
So, so
Yeah.
it's, and so I'm sometimes delivering that message and then I'm like, "Shit, I didn't get what I wanted out of that from a bump standpoint."
Yeah, so I guess James is up in Toronto right now at the North America Radio Days. So there's a few folks from the podcast industry up there speaking at that event. I didn't venture up there, but that's going on. I think today,
Well,
actually.
So are you being affected in your area with all this smog and smoke?
Smoke. Yeah,
Smoke?
from the 150 Canadian wildfires. Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah.
I heard they shut down JFK and stuff today. I heard it got so bad they did a ground stop on airline traffic.
Oh really? I hadn't heard that, but
And it's,
yeah, I know.
so
I went out and got a new air filter for my air conditioning system.
wow.
That was specific. That I've done that when I used to live out in Seattle too, because
Sure.
Seattle would have a bunch of wildfires up in Canada, and I'm just a little perplexed why the fires are always happening up in Canada. I wonder what's going on with that.
Well, they happen in California too because they don't
They
burn
do.
anymore.
Right.
And they happen out west, and we have fires all over the United States all the time. It's an
It
amazing
seems like
thing.
that they're always the worst up in Canada, though, for some
But
reason.
lightning strikes the ground,
Right.
a tree, or something, or someone throws out a cigarette or whatever,
Right.
and guess what? Next thing you knew, you get 80,000 acres on fire.
Well, from what
So
I've heard, that 9 million square 9 million square miles or acres have actually been affected by this up in
wow,
Canada.
that's
So
big.
it's huge.
So they
Huge.
must be super, super dry up there right now then.
I guess. I mean, it's crazy, but I know that everybody's staying inside now, and I noticed in New York City they're back to wearing masks again.
Well, I would think probably an appropriate time to actually wear a mask
Well,
compared
there
to
you
the other
go. Well,
times.
that's what is the appropriate time, right? It's not a political debate. It's like it's not healthy to breathe wood smoke.
You,
That's
you
kind
know,
of what it
when
is.
you're walking around in New York, you are exposed to more nasty smells and coming from cars. Are they
Tailpipe,
worried about? They're
right?
worried about a little smoke,
A little smoke. Todd, it turns the sun red.
right?
So
I know.
it's more than a little smoke, but
Well,
yeah.
but still, cars and turns the skyline purple too, or blue, or whatever, what it is from exhaust. So come
Right.
on.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, so
But
anything else going on with you?
well, yeah, I'll be back. Well, actually, next week, I'm going to be in Columbus, and my team is all flying in. So we're convening for our last hoorah at our office. This will be the last time we do a team meeting, at least in the office we're in now, because our lease is up in the end of July, and we're shutting down our 6,000 square foot office in Columbus, largely because everyone's remote. We've been remote. We've stayed remote. And people have moved around from the pandemic, and we really don't need the seat. So if you're in the Columbus area and you would like a stand-up desk, a really nice one, we do have a couple for sale. We've got we're going to be doing a liquidation of whatever we can sell before our lease is up at the end of July, and the rest of it will sadly probably go into storage.
Oh, I see.
So, and I've been very adamant that I want climate controlled storage, because the mistake people do when they put nice equipment into storage units that aren't climate controlled, within about 3, 4, 5 months, all of a sudden, because of the heat, everything starts getting gunky, and you might just throw it in the trash. So
Right.
we're gonna be put stuff in climate controlled storage, and hopefully we'll be able to sell a bunch of stuff before we close the office. But it's kind of crazy. I think we spent 70, maybe 75 grand on office furniture, and got 2-3 years worth of use out of it, and then the pandemic hit, and it's one of those things where you're like, well, that was dumb, but at the time it was just the way we were operating. And so we got TVs, we've got nice chairs. So again, if you're in the
So reach out to Todd.
yeah, we'll probably be putting stuff up on Facebook Marketplace. So
Got it. So I wanted to say, if you're watching this and you want to throw a comment in whatever platform that you're listening on, I can actually see those comments and I can put them up on the screen, and we can answer your question. So feel free to post a question in the kind of chat area of whatever platform that you're listening for. I'm not sure if all the platforms are supporting this process, but post a comment or a question, and we'd be happy to talk about it in the last few minutes of the show. So
very quiet over on our Facebook page, and I don't know why but so yeah, no comments on Facebook so far. But what is this? Facebook's trying to get me to create an avatar. Is this something new in
an
Facebook?
avatar.
Yeah, it says create with avatar. I don't need an avatar.
Lou wrote us. Oh, there we go.
Oh, he said, "Hey,
Lou
fellas."
Montigello wrote us. Hey, Lou.
There's a name. There's an OG right there.
Yeah, he's been doing podcasts about Disney forever. Lou.
One thing's for sure, he's got a lot to talk about recently with all the drama,
Right. That's
with
true.
Disney.
Yeah.
But I tell you the one thing that because I've been remote away from the studio for almost a month now, and you appreciate you learn to appreciate good bandwidth, and you have but you can really do this with a minimalistic system. I only came with my Rodecaster, my MacBook, and one PC. And really, the only reason I came with the PC is I had it set up to do the streaming. And now, hindsight's 2020. I probably could have just done it with a MacBook. But 2 computers, a Rodecaster, a boom mic, and
that's a lot to pack on an airplane, isn't it?
Not bad, actually.
Not too
It packs up pretty. It all fits into one tiny suitcase. So and just
Well,
one
and
check
your
bag.
boom arm too,
Yeah,
right?
it fits right into one of those small carry-on
Oh,
type
it
of.
does.
But I check it and it did fine. But yeah, very, very minimalistic. Now, if one cable went bad, we would be in trouble. But I've been very, very careful here. But yeah, back in the studio. Actually, like I said, I'll be in Columbus next week. But after that, we'll be back live in the Palatial New Media Production Studios. So
It's like Mike Dell wrote us. I did a boostergram. Thank you, Mike.
oh, he did. So let me go look. I'm not hearing the boost come through for some reason. And how come that didn't update? Let me refresh the page. Oh, live boost, go podcasting, a 333 boost, so a 3333 boost. So thanks, Mike, for the boost.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And then Lou wrote, I don't know, through 3 old school podcasters get into a room, right?
Right.
Well, and you got to include Mike Dell in that one too, right? So there's 4.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But to be honest with you, Rob, it's just for me, it's been very, very productive. I've been able to really, really hone down and concentrate, and so it's been nice. So we'll see what happens when we get back in Michigan and back in the studio.
So Todd, as you think about, like the next couple of years or whatever, what do you think of the role of kind of OG podcasters like ours have in this medium? What kind of a role do you see us, or is there going to be a whole new generation of folks that are going to kind of take over for us or from us ultimately? What do you think?
Well, I don't know. I guess we'll have to see, because most of them don't last long enough to take over for us. Most
Or is it just
of
that
them,
they haven't been around long enough?
or they time out. They don't stay with the industry long enough. Therein lies the challenge. Is you look at Mike. Mike's been in the space, just about as long as the rest of us have, and Lou as well. And there's not a lot of people that can say they've been, especially works directly in the industry,
Right.
on a day-to-day basis, that stay in the same place for, you look at you, Rob, you've bounced around,
Oh, yeah.
6, 7 different jobs.
Yeah.
So, but I don't think there's
Yeah,
a
but
lot
I was
of,
doing that before I started getting into podcasting. So
yeah, but I don't think there's a lot of people that stay in the space for
Yeah.
many, many years.
Yeah, I started
So
working in the online media space in 1999. So it isn't like I'm a Johnny come lately. It's just I've worked for a variety of companies in the space, and that's going to continue. I'm working with StreamYard now, and so there's going to be probably a couple other companies that I'm going to align with in my efforts. So,
but in part of the challenge is the ongoing challenge then would be, is, at least for me, the thought process is, okay, who is going to stay in the industry long enough to basically, step into any type of leadership shoes when it comes to educating and fighting for the space and doing everything else that is needed on an ongoing basis, and not be willing to roll over to the closed ecosystem or be part of the closed ecosystem, promoting the closed ecosystem.
yeah, I do think that, I can think of a few folks that are stepping up, like an Ariel Nissenblatt is
Right.
one that's really kind of stepped up and becoming an influencer in the podcasting space. And she's part of that kind of younger generation that's coming
Sure.
up. And I do think that she tends to embrace these new ideas in the podcasting space increasingly, but we're oftentimes a little skeptical of and feel like it's still early. But I also, AI is going to dramatically change things. So we're going to see a different landscape as you look to the future. And I just wonder, there are signs of other folks that are going to step up and be leaders in this medium going forward. But I agree with you, Todd. I think it's different now. It's not.
I'll take a little exception to AI changing podcasting.
Well,
AI is going to maybe change
it's going to change some parts of
production,
it, right?
but it's not going to change. The person still has to have an engaging voice, still has to be able to engage an audience, ask questions, talk without stumbling completely over themselves like I do all the time. They're going to have to have, there's still going to have to be a voice talent. There's still going to have to be a podcaster. No AI is going to take over the New Media Show. No AI is going to take over the Geek News Central Show, where someone is going to listen and thinking that if they think they're listening to a bot, there's no warmth in that. There's no humanity. It's
Right.
just being dribbled to you. So
Hmm.
I still think from a entertainment standpoint, you're still going to have a voice. You're still going to have to interject. You're going to have to be a human emotion, all the things that go along with it. And if we get to the point where bots are creating podcast content, it's going to be a very, very sad day. And maybe people are going to experiment with putting that type of
Yeah,
content out.
I
But
think
I
it's already
hope,
being done. I think it's
well,
already being done.
well, I hope people do not embrace that content. If they embrace that content, then we're doomed. We are
Well,
doomed.
it's novelty content right now, right? It's kind of like, oh, this was created by AI. I'm
Yeah.
going to listen to it, but are they going to engage with it on
How
a
can you engage with it? It's a language
long-term
model.
basis? It's not
You
a
don't engage with it. It's a language model. It's not. It doesn't have human characteristics. It hasn't come to life. It
but it
hasn't
could.
passed the
It could.
Turing test. No, 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 no.
Well, there's many in the industry that think that we have reached a Turing point with
Oh, I don't know about that.
with some of these tools. There's stealth AI tools out there that aren't public that are much better than Chat GPT, from what I've heard. So they're 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 stealth projects, is what they are, and
Well,
those are the projects that we all have to be a little bit worried about.
again, when it comes to human interactivity,
Hmm.
I don't care. The day a bot replaces my voice, I'll retire. I'll just be done. I'm not. And if people are too,
That's what Descript is trying to do, right? You can create your voice clone over there on their
well,
platform,
they have hopefully
the overdub.
that is being used as an
Mm.
overdub to edit, not necessarily to create a whole line of content.
I think
Um,
it's going to be used that way. I think the first part or the first place it's going to be used is around translation into multiple languages. So
I
you'll
could
take
say I
the
could see,
English version, put it into the system, create a transcript, and then create derivative multi-language content out of that transcript.
but I think what's going to happen is that that will be less than perfect for a very,
Yeah,
very long time.
I would tend to agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, if
And
you
I
look
don't
at
know if
the
I don't.
highest percentage of accuracy, it's usually like what, 93,
Well, if you
94%.
give it a very accurate transcript, it'll create again, any type of translation software, I don't care what you use, it doesn't get it right. Maybe 50% of the time it gets the
Yeah, so what you're gonna
context
have to
correct.
do is you're gonna have to, create the episode and then run it through the transcription service, and then you're gonna have a human editor review it, edit it before you take it to translating into another human's
And
voice. It could be the same host's voice that translates it into various languages.
97% of podcasters will never do this because they can't afford it. They don't have the
Well,
time. They
that's
don't have
the
the
part.
time to make social
Right.
posts.
Right.
So come on.
Yeah.
I think we're getting ahead of ourselves just a little bit on this. We'll see where this leads. I understand from I know a lot of people that do copy editing, they should be shivering in their boots from a jobs perspective because I hear that industry is just getting decimated. Uh,
Copy editing, I mean,
Copy editing, people that are doing short stories, bloggers, paid writers, those
paid
folks
writers,
are
right?
getting decimated currently
Well,
because they're bringing.
that's why we have a writer's strike going on right now, probably.
Well, I think what it is ultimately because it's a language model. Those folks are going to be affected the most first, and then other
Right.
industries down the road.
I still think
But
that there's folks out there that think that the writer's strike is having a big impact on podcasting, and I tend to think that
what?
that's not the case. I mean, there's a certain
Well,
subset of the industry that's affected by that, but they're usually high production shows, right? That hire writers, right?
high
Most shows
production
don't.
scripted shows that I have absolutely no desire to listen to because there's very little humanity and it's just someone reading a script, and
Right.
anyone can do that.
It's like TV content
So
or movies or that kind of stuff,
true.
right? Yep.
But
So,
again,
but
97, 98% of podcasters will never have the budget to have a screenwriter writing for them.
yeah,
It's just a
that's
fact.
true.
This is still an this is still an indie space
Yeah.
with a segmented commerciality that's closed.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm still kind of wrestling with the concept of how much do I embrace this AI stuff or how much do I shun it because it's going to potentially make changes to the industry, just like with what's happening with YouTube. Are we thinking we're progressive or we're advancing the medium while at the same time undermining it at the same time? So
Here's
kind
what
of
else. Here's my thought process. You and I record for the audience. Everyone records for the audience. What we do with the metadata is for Google.
right.
So the AI piece is going to help improve the metadata that
Yeah.
Google gets that it can chew on. That's the majority of the improvement. And it's going to maybe help people that are less creative create maybe more creative episode titles, maybe create a little
Yeah.
richer, deeper show notes.
Or don't have time to do it.
There's some stuff here there's
Right.
going to be some stuff that's going to come that's going to give an average podcaster a little additional advantage in putting out maybe chapter markers and that kind of stuff. So
So are you going to start doing that with this show to some degree? Or what's your thoughts on that? I'm thinking about doing it for the other shows that I'm involved
well,
in,
first of all,
trying to use
in,
the
in
platforms.
order to take the transcript from this show, I have to and ingest it into any of these platforms. I have to have an API access to do that because I can't just shove an hour and a half worth of transcript into the thing because it won't take it.
Oh, it won't take it?
It won't take it because it's beyond the character limit. That's why you have to have the API access to do it. That's why the
Well, I thought
integrations.
doesn't Blueberry support transcripts? I thought you guys did that.
We do. But you take a transcript then and you have to take that. If you take that raw transcript without an AI, without a Podium or Capshow or Medium,
Right.
and you shove that into Chat GPT, it says too many characters. You have to.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right.
I gotcha. Right.
Yep.
Okay.
And it's a
Yeah.
pain in the butt, and so it adds just a whole bunch of more time. So
Yeah. So I'm getting free access to Capshow, so I'll be able. I mean, I could process it in Capshow if we
yeah,
wanted to.
and the thing is, I've been running this show through Medium, and
Oh, yeah.
again, the results I get are from a titling and from a show notes description is less than optimal.
Not what you
Not
want
what
to
I
do.
would not what I would type.
Yeah. That's always the key question, right? Is it better than what the podcaster would write, or is it lesser than? If it's too generic
hmm
and not precise enough,
It's
it may not be
just
as
easy.
effective.
It's just easier for me to handwrite it myself without going through this extra minutia.
Yeah, because as far as I know, the AI isn't technical enough to evaluate popularity of keywords, right? As an evaluational filter, right?
Right. But for Geek News Central, it's become part of my workflow because the show notes are a different animal and how I produce those over there.
Right.
So this show, I just have to see how it works. Have to figure it out. Have to figure out a workflow.
Yeah. So I wonder how you create a standard output through Chat GPT through this, as far as on show notes and stuff like that. I was talking to the CEO of Capshow and asking her about some of those questions too around, standard format, or is there the ability to create unique formats of the show notes, right? Or is it a standard output, right, that has the certain structure to it? The contents may vary based on the
I
the
think
source
with
file.
this long form content like this, I think the model has a hard time with it. I think it has a very, very hard time with this depth of data to create
Well, it's like it crashed the Chat GPT
right.
app.
I think it has a hard time creating a good summary.
Right.
think shorter
and-
shows will do better with some of this. It's more tight than where the content's more tight.
Yeah, I didn't try and do it for this week's episode. I probably should have tried again to see if I could get it to work. But yeah,
Well, when I
I'll-
get back in the studio, I'll be playing around with it and see if I can.
right. So we're not doing a show next week.
No
correct?
show next week, and then we'll be
Okay.
back on schedule. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we're at the end of
Oh, yes, we are. We're at
our
the
90
end.
minutes. We made it.
Yes, we did. So anyway,
Hope we didn't bore you to death. Right.
yeah, and we didn't go too far down the AI rabbit hole until
Well,
the
I
end.
think we definitely went down the AI rabbit hole. All right.
So anyway, I'm Todd at blueberry.com, at Geek News on Twitter.
I'm at Rob Greenlee on Twitter as well, and I have a website, robgreenlee.com, and you can check out my new show. That is Trust Factor, and that's on the 100TV Network .com. So you can check that out. You can send me an email if you want, rob.greenlee@gmail.com, and I'd love to hear from you.
And don't forget to get over to newmediashow.com and follow or subscribe to the podcast. We are also on Twitter at NMS Podcast. And we're basically everywhere podcasts can be consumed. I think we're on like 20 different locations right now with this live stream. So
Yeah, it's
you
on
can-
all my personal profiles as well. So
yep. So
right.
okay. Everyone,
All
thanks for being here, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Okay. All right,
All right.
Todd.
Take care. Thanks.
Great show, Todd.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you too.
Thanks for joining us. Right.